fairly hear. Good afternoon. My name is Mark Staples, and I welcome you to a continuing series of legislative candidate interviews brought to you by Bresnan Communications, the Missoula Community Access Television, and the Montana Cable Television Association. My guest this afternoon is competing for the House seat in House District 93. Her name is Denise Moore, and she's the Republican candidate running against Democratic candidate Ron Erickson. Ron was here earlier, and I don't know how we'll set these interviews up when they finally run. They may run back to back. But because of a scheduling mix-up, Ron and Denise were not on camera together, but Denise is now here, and we're going to afford her an opportunity to field the same questions that Ron did. So Denise, excuse me, welcome. Thank you for coming. Sorry for the scheduling mix-up. I'd like you to introduce yourself to the viewing audience. Give them your background, how it came to be that you are seeking this seat. Maybe once again describe for the viewers the geographic parameters of your district so they know whether they indeed get to vote for you if they should choose you, and what motivates you to run for this.
Okay. Well, my name's Denise Moore. I'm running for House District 93, and that is, it's an interestingly shaped district. It starts in the university area, east of Higgins, goes into Patty Canyon out to Deer Creek, up through Whitaker, everything east of Whitaker, up into Mansion Heights, Farview's Mansion Heights area. Then it goes behind the mountain, goes into Miller Creek, picks up Maloney Ranch, parts of Linda Vista Boulevard and such. So it's a pretty sweeping district. So my background is, this is my first run for office, but my professional background is more than 25 years in hotel management and operations consulting. So with that, I found that in hotel management and hospitality business, it requires certain skills, the ability to communicate with people, problem solve, bring people of different interests, cultures, backgrounds together to one table to meet common goals. And I figured that that is probably a pretty good skill to be able to bring to the legislature.
And when you get to the legislature, if you get there, what are your driving concerns just in general, and then we'll get into some specific questions.
Okay. Well, one of the motivating issues that caused me to decide to go ahead and run this time around was a lot of publicity in recent years over child predators, violent acts against children. So, and I noticed in the state of Montana, we don't have any real tough laws against convicted sexual violent offenders. So I did a little bit of studying and decided that this state needs to enact something along the lines of a Jessica's Law, which was passed in Florida in 2005, that would require a minimum mandatory sentencing for convicted predators, as well as lifetime registration and monitoring on parole.
On a large, so that there's a personal motivation, because you'll need one to the work that's involved in running for these offices and the work that's involved if you get elected. You're also going to run into a situation that I think unmatched in the history of Montana, which is not just a surplus, but an enormous budget surplus, about which there are many ideas of how to spend it and what to do with it. And I guess my question is, there are two competing plans: the Democrats, which is called the Square Deal for Montana; the Republicans, which is a handshake with Montana. Centerpieces of each, among other things, are property tax reductions or rebates. The Democrats is a $400 per residence, per household rebate. One time, the Republicans is an 8% refund or an 8% reduction in property taxes. I believe it's ongoing, and it's across all property, not just residential. Do you endorse either one of those plans kind of in total, or do you have your, or do you have your own ideas about what should be done, if anything, with a surplus?
Well, I do endorse the plans in essence, but I think that what we need to do first is take a look at the surplus and try to get a better determination of why we're seeing that surplus. And if this is more than just, is it a trend? Is this an ongoing trend that we're going to be seeing over the years, or is this a short-term anomaly? But based on that, then I think that if we do any sort of rebate or refund to Montana taxpayers, I think it needs to be equitable. And that means establish a percentage that would be reduced on personal property taxes. I think that's a good place to start. I think also, though, that we need to be taking a look at that surplus and determine how much of it needs to be retained and reinvested in the state of Montana. So I think there's a two-parter going there.
Speaking of reinvestment, the Montana Supreme Court found several years back that the school system, K through 12, was inadequately funded. Well, actually, that was the conclusion some people drew from a decision that actually said that the system of funding was unconstitutional because it was not equitable and it did not provide quality, which is a billion-dollar word there, quality education equally across the board. The legislature sought to address it with an $80 million addition to school funding during the last session and a $37 million addition in a special session. Do you think that addressed the problem as it existed or does exist, or do we have farther to go? And if so, what do we need to do? What are your ideas on school funding? And if you wish to talk about higher education funding as well, particularly being from Missoula, you can certainly segue into that.
Okay. Well, when it comes to the quality education for all issue, as I understand it, the Supreme Court stated that the funding formula was part of that equation. And I don't think that our legislature adequately attended to that issue. I think we need to go back and take a look. As one voter said to me one day, it's not the quantity of the money that really makes the difference, it's the quality of the effort and the distribution of the money. So I think the legislature has definitely a bigger job to tackle here on that front. So we want to make certain that the money that is distributed makes it to the classrooms, to the teachers, that the children really do reap a real benefit from it. On higher education, we hear a lot, especially in this area, we hear a lot about the high cost of tuition. And I agree that we need to find ways to hold tuition down, to keep that creep out. It's a challenge, but I think part of the challenge comes in the issue of potential waste. So for the money that goes to the university system, how much of that is wasted due to poor financial planning? Every year that there is a budget shortfall, we hear something about, well, we didn't project our enrollment numbers properly, so now we've got a budget shortfall. Well, I think we need to go back to the drawing board and rework our standards for projections, and then take a look at how that affects dollars allocated by the state, because I'm concerned that tuition may be driven by bad planning.
Speaking of things that creep up on you, the deficit in the public employees pension program, a significant portion of it, the majority of it, is teachers' retirement, is estimated to be at $1.3 billion. So even if we have a $750 million surplus, we're still, compared to that, in the hole. Now, it's not actual debt, it's actuarial debt, but nevertheless, it's, you are constitutionally mandated to stay actuarially sound, and we're not actuarially sound. If you get the legislature, are you willing to go along with the proposal from the governor's budget office to put $100 million was put into in the last session? Are you in favor of putting another significant portion of that to get that actuarially sound?
I think what we need to do is take a look at the whole picture. I mean, once we decide how much of a surplus is there really, how long will that surplus last, or is this an ongoing thing, a trend, as I said earlier? Then we need to determine, in addition to all of the other areas that are going to be expecting increased funding, what can we afford as a state to put back or to contribute to that fund? I wish I were an expert on that point. I wish I were an expert on that particular fund. I'm not. But as I understand, its income is based upon how the money's invested. So perhaps we need to rethink the investments that we're using to get a return.
Well, it's interesting because the estimates are, I mean, they have no small task. In order to, each year, the investments for the teachers' retirement system has to earn at least 7.75% just to stay even. And for the public employees' retirement system, they have to earn at least 8% to stay even. So the people that are making those investments have their work cut out for them, because those are not easy numbers to hit.
It's a heck of a return.
Yes, that is a heck of a return. I think if we could find programs where we could invest our monies for 8%, we'd snap them up if you could have it guaranteed. And they have to hit that every time. Taxes in general, you spoke of taxes, and of course that's where the surpluses come from. And yet people still talk about tax reform. They talk about a need for local option sales taxes, or statewide sales taxes, or tourist taxes, or pop taxes, or sin taxes. They talk about needs to reduce taxes or to increase particular taxes. Do you have a tax philosophy? Do you think we need to make some changes, and if so, what?
Yeah, I do have a tax philosophy. Coming from a small business background, oftentimes increasing taxes to increase revenue does not necessarily increase the cash flow going into the state's coffers. Sometimes it can have the unintended negative effect, suppressing commerce, suppressing consumer spending. So I think that this state has been seeing some success through tax reductions that, as a result, have increased tax revenues. And what I mean by that is, say, the small business equipment tax. We've been seeing that reduction graduated over the years from 12% down to the current 3%. With that reduction, I think small businesses, especially those small businesses that are equipment intensive, have been able to, rather than pay higher taxes, reinvest that money in their business, whether it's through adding employees, increasing their manufacturing output, increasing their marketing reach. When they do that and they increase their cash flow into their business, they pay more taxes without paying a higher tax burden. And I think that is one of the essential ingredients that's gone into this increased tax revenue that we're seeing right now.
And so you would be in favor of maintaining the status quo rather than... we don't have a Democratic opponent here, but as I recall some of his comments, and he's very careful, as I recall, he was on the tax committee, and he's careful about, he said, creating new programs with one-time money. So you would suggest that, are you in favor of reducing that business equipment tax from the 3% down to 0, or is it the tax formula as we now have it adequate as far as you're concerned?
I would like to see the legislature return that formula back, and that was, in order to go from 3 to 0, it would have been a graduated step down reduction based upon key economic indicators. So there would have been several factors that would have had to have been successfully met in successive years in order to take it from 3% to 2, then meet that criteria again, 2% to 1, meet the criteria again, 1% to 0. Now, what I see is if we meet those economic indicators and we're successfully able to reduce those taxes, then the companies are successful at being able to reinvest that money in themselves, increasing tax revenue. I don't see the negative implication that my opponent does. So I think we need to bring it back.
The other defining feature of our tax system right now is that is that we don't have a sales tax. I mean, it distinguishes us significantly across the country, to some people's great pride and to some people's great agitation. There's a proposal. I don't know that there's a proposal for a statewide sales tax, but there's certainly going to be a proposal, as there have been in recent years, and there are growing proposals, to give local communities the option to impose upon certain sectors of that community, normally retail sectors, a local option tax. Much like the hotel tax, which you've got to be, the hotel bed tax, which you've got to be familiar with. And this would expand that into what are called luxury items. But the proponents of that say the beauty of it is that the people in the local area get to vote for it or vote against it. And the opponents say, well, because it always ends up on 4 or 5 sectors, most of them the hospitality sector, the public will vote for it and then let that sector of the community pay for it. There's going to be significant debate about this. Do you have any thoughts of it? Do you have a position on it?
Yeah, I do. I firmly believe in keeping local issues local. So when it comes to local option sales tax, it's called that for a reason. I don't think that's something that the state should interfere with. It should be up to localities to determine. However, as a business person, I strongly caution against local option sales tax because, if I have a few moments to describe this, consumer behavior is much like, it moves like water. It will travel the course of least resistance. When you have, let's say, Town A deciding to implement a local option sales tax and Town B, adjacent, does not, the consumer will move to Town B. It's just human nature. We have desires and we act on those desires, and one of those is to pay less taxes. So the consumer will move to Town B. What will happen is the merchant will follow. They're losing their consumer base. They're going to go where the consumer base is gone. So the merchant, chances are, business will move to that area. So you've had the unintended consequence of actually rejecting or losing that source of income that you were hoping to capitalize on. So I just think you need to exercise a great deal of caution on that.
Fair enough. We're just about out of time. I would love to talk to you further, but I'll invite you to kind of close by emphasizing anything you haven't emphasized about your particular candidacy and why at, as they say, the end of the day or the beginning of the day, depending on what time of day our viewers hopefully vote, they should they should check your name instead of Ron Erickson's to represent your House district.
Well, I'm running for office because I have seen a need in my district for somebody who will represent the people of that district. And I think when people are looking for a representative, they're looking for somebody that most closely aligns with their ideals and their needs. And part of that is listening to people, and not just during campaign season. I'm speaking about throughout that 2-year period when you are hired to represent the people. One of the things that I have done with my campaign, and I plan on taking it through my term, is I set up a website, denisemore.org. On that website, I have a community interest survey. It's helping me get a better picture of the priorities that people want to see addressed in the legislature. So the difference, I think, between me and my opponent is my dedication and devotion to communicating with the constituents, learning more from them. I'm not here to lecture to my constituents. I am here to learn from my constituents, take the information that they have to give to me, and take it back to Helena and work on their behalf.
Well, I thank you for joining us. I know it's difficult to make these. Our viewers will see this at night, but these are afternoon sessions on a working day, and these are, for the most part, professional people who have taken their time to come and join us and taken their time, much more time, to run for these offices. And on behalf of Bresnan and Missoula Community Access and Montana Cable Television Association, we thank you not only for appearing today, but for taking your time to run for this office, and if you're elected, to serve in the office. And hopefully, in respect for those sacrifices, you, the voter, will sift the information you've heard this afternoon or this evening and take it and make up your mind, and by all means, go to the polls and vote. Thank you.